Good morning, everyone. Good morning, and welcome to the New Energy Advancement Hub Living event. Today, we are going to talk about decarbonized molecules and strategies for scaling up. New Energy Advancement Hub is a platform for the promotion of the new energy technologies, decarbonization, and energy transition. And today, we are going to talk about the most interesting part of the energy transition, which is decarbonized molecules. And my name is Tatiana Mitrova. I'm director and founder of the New Energy Advancement Hub. And today I'm really, really happy to welcome a good friend of mine, good colleague, Kirsten Westphal, Dr. Kirsten Westphal, who is a member of the General Executive Management Board of BDEW. You will tell us, Kirsten, what it means, okay? It's really great pleasure to have you with us today because, frankly, there are so many myths around molecules. There is such a hype around hydrogen that, frankly, I wanted to go from the basics, from the fundamentals, just to explain how it works, why it is important. So, Kirsten, the first question that I have to you, it's maybe too simple, but nevertheless, I will ask it. What are these decarbonized molecules, and why do we need them badly for the energy transition?
Hi, Tatiana. Thanks very much for introducing me and for having me. I'm very pleased to sharing maybe some insights, but also ideas, because as you say, we really at the beginning of rolling out decarbonized molecules in Germany, in Europe, but also worldwide. And we really need it for the energy transition and for addressing the climate challenge. First, I wanted to say BDEW is the German Association for Energy and Water Industries. So the combination of the energy industry plus the water supply companies. And that's quite interesting also with regard to hydrogen, because water is an issue here. So if we talk about decarbonized molecules, you're really right. I think everybody has a different idea of the spectrum of molecules, what we're talking about. And I would even say maybe better talk about defossilized molecules, because we also have to think about biomethane, biogas, and then biomethane is an issue in order to keep having a supply of defossilized molecules, or molecules as part of a decarbonized, defossilized energy system. The other part, of course, is hydrogen. And hydrogen has a big range if we talk about the production methods. And I would also include, of course, the derivatives such as ammonia, such as methanol, such as sustainable aviation fuel, even synthetic gas, synthetic natural gas, because we need to have a transport vector, but also they can function as energy vectors itself. So it's really, as you said, it's a broad range, and I think we are still in the situation of discovering how to use, how to transport these molecules, and also how to put the supply chains together. What is very clear is what you said, if we want to have a climate neutral energy system by 2050, by 2045, as Germany has spelled it out as a target, and even a nationally binding target, that is what we're having, then you need these kind of defossilized molecules within the energy system, because it's very simple. If you look to the primary energy mix, molecules still form a major part, and they are also so important not only as energy carriers, but also as really storage. This is the big advantage that you have with the molecules. You can store it, you can't store the electrons, as we all know. So as a backup, it's very important to have the molecules. Maybe this would be the first intro into this topic.
Okay, let me clarify a little bit here. So you are right, there are so many sources and types of these decarbonized molecules, and there are different applications, different usage areas. So maybe we could also just clarify why electrons do not cover everything. So when we are talking about electrons, it is electricity, it is power that we're using, and the whole energy transition, it's about increased electrification, like electric vehicles, so transport sector where traditionally we were using internal combustion engines and fossil fuels, it is increasingly switching to electricity or electric heating, and many other applications where we are really replacing fuels, molecules, with electrons. But there are still areas where we cannot make this replacement in an efficient way. And this is exactly where we need these decarbonized molecules. So, for example, the rest of the transportation sector where electrification is not probably the best option, or some industrial processes where we really need very high temperature heat, which cannot be provided by electricity, or what else? And so does any other applications come to your mind where actually we are not in a good technological shape to replace molecules with electrons?
I think that's a very important, that's actually the approach to look at the applications where we need in the future energy system, where we will still need molecules. And this is indeed, as you say, it's the industry, which simply needs hydrogen, but also needs carbon. So this is kind of where you have the molecules, decarbonized molecules, as a feedstock. This is industrial application, chemical industry, very important, plastics and so on. And then you have the other issue where you really need to secure the generation of electricity and heat and cooling, which you need simply this dispatching.
So like to cover this intermittency.
Exactly. And then, as you say, I would say the molecules fly and swim. So you need for the heavy transport, you need like aviation, like shipping industry, but also heavy load transport is very difficult to imagine. Just imagine big continents where you simply don't have the electricity lines to feed into electric cars. So I think these are the sectors where we definitely need the molecules. But we came out with a paper saying, well, for the path of transformation, we simply do not only have to look at the system that we imagine at the end, but we also have to have a resilient path for the transformation. And this is where we're not starting the transformation from scratch, but within an existing energy system that has to work. We during the time of transformation, we also have to have security of supply. And this is a very big challenge because we have, of course, to supply and secure the supplies of traditional fuels without perpetuating, but at the same time really have to transform. And here molecules are so important for a resilient. So it's maybe more than just securing the intermittency, backing up renewables. We still need for some time of the base load gases. And this is, Germany has bets on natural gases as a transition fuel. And so this is what I mean with a transition path that we have to secure. And of course, then you also still have the issue of mobility, which plays a role. And then very important, not only in the industry having gases as feedstock, but also for the high process heat, where we need beyond 200 degrees. We will, of course, need molecules because you can't, it's very difficult and really requires new, very challenging technologies if you would want to really electrify. And we also have this issue of, well, the grids not having the capacity to supply the load that would be needed at the end of the supply chain. So it's really important to have the molecules as part of the backup, but also as another area of the energy system.
So basically, you are saying, and I really want our audience to clearly understand that energy transition is just impossible without these decarbonized molecules, which are now, now the molecules are providing for very significant part of primary energy consumption. So we need to replace them with decarbonized molecules if we are really serious about going net zero. We need to start doing it right now, because there is a long path, and in this respect, molecules are absolutely critical. But also at the point B, where we are all moving in this wonderful world with net zero, actually, we will still need a lot of these decarbonized molecules just to keep our economic system, our energy system functional. So it's impossible to avoid them. And therefore, we have to look at them and find the efficient ways and economically efficient and mentally friendly ways to produce them. So you've mentioned several types of these decarbonized molecules. How can we produce them? Where can we get them from? So maybe if you could spend a little bit of time on each of these options. So we have different types of hydrogen, we have biogas, biomethane, what else? And maybe some features. What are like pros and contras for each of these options? Because I see that people in many cases get puzzled, like, oh, biomethane, synthetic methane, e-methane. What's the difference? What does it mean?
Oh yeah, I could try because it gets really complicated, and there are still there's still a necessity to really try and find the best way of, for example, transporting hydrogen over continents, over the sea. But what you said is very important, Tatiana. Exactly, that was the point. We need molecules in the net zero energy system, but we also need it for the path, the transition path. And just to give you the imagine, you said that we, for a large part of our energy system, is really composed of molecules. You know, if I look to the German primary energy composition, it's more than 35% still oil and 25% almost natural gas. This also means that a lot of energy stored chemically that you need to somehow move into the future. Biomethane is certainly an issue to look at, because it can help in exactly supplying, for example, local regional areas, clusters. And we have, of course, with the agricultural production, and a lot of sources that can be mentioned, but have to be, of course, clustered in a sense. So it's a large discussion, for example, how long will we have parallel methane pipeline system and the hydrogen pipeline system. And here it starts already. Infrastructure is really key in order to start a defossilized molecule system. So,
Kirsten, may I interrupt you? Just
yes,
I wanted to ask about the magnitude. So when we are talking about biomethane, so which is produced basically from the agricultural waste, Yeah, and
Yeah.
it is really a good incentive for the farmers because they can monetize their, let's say, byproducts. Yeah, it is local, it is distributed, so there are many advantages. What are the potential volumes, let's say, for Europe as a whole or for Germany alone? So, what magnitude of impact we are talking about, because agricultural lands are limited. So how much biomethane potentially, let's say, Germany could produce if all the farmers would apply this technology? What is the potential?
I think it's not that easy to answer the question, because we are now looking into exactly a strategy, or not we, but the German government, how to use natural raw materials, and in which sectors. So what could be the merit order of these products? Because there is, of course, a lot of discussion around tank and plate and so on. But of course, there is a certain volume to be discussed, and not only. I think we really have to look, let's say, transnationally, because there are discussions, for example, to import biomethane from Ukraine, and then you're talking about another magnitude. Then you're talking about a regional, national, or local clusters combined with international corridors. So for Germany, it's very important to understand what the neighboring countries are doing and how to think that together. So it's really a process of reading what neighbors are doing, and the planning of the infrastructure that is needed. And of course, it's not the magnitude of the natural gas volumes today, but it's a significant part, and we are looking into smaller parts of how to get to supply security. So I think biomethane is an issue, and this is still a discussion that we're having right now, heavily in Europe. It's also part of the Repower EU Act, which should be mentioned as a response to Russia's war against Ukraine. The EU came out with its Repower EU Act to become independent from Russian natural gas and to quickly become more, self-supplying. And here, biomethane plays an important role. But I think when we talk about the jump into a new future, hydrogen is more important, because hydrogen is part of not only the energy transformation, but also the industrial transformation and the leap into new technologies. So I think we should focus now more on hydrogen and go through the production methods, as you said.
Mm-hmm. So having in mind biomethane, which is rather, let's say, conventional technology. Yeah, it's not a frontier from the technology point of view. And there are many of such plants working across Europe. It will not definitely replace all the decarbonized molecules needed, but it's something which is already there and which will keep growing, especially given the fact that supporting this, you are also supporting your agricultural sector. So there are additional benefits.
Exactly, and it's part of what this to secure dispatchable power. It's a kind of, but that can be used regionally, locally, in communities for combined heat and power. So it is a part in the mosaic. And I think in the future energy system, we are looking into these combinations between very centralized ways and options, like also high voltage direct currency lines, and below that, other levels of decentralized energy and electricity supplies. And the same goes for decarbonized molecules. So kind of centralized, bigger really transport pipelines for hydrogen then, but also local production of both hydrogen, but also biomethane, and then aerial pipeline grids. that we're thinking of.
So
It
that's a
requires a
good,
lot of planning.
yeah, so that's a good moment, I think, to move from biomethane to hydrogen,
Yeah.
which is probably the hottest issue. I mean, everybody is talking about hydrogen. There are it's like the whole rainbow, all the colors of hydrogen, and new appear like every year. It looks, um, so what is your understanding of the current situation of the hydrogen economy development? For many years, it was a bit of a theoretical discussion. Yeah, so there were lots of ideas how it could be, how it could develop in the future, but just few projects in reality with the real hardware. Now I think the situation is changing. So where are we now with this hydrogen economy evolution? And what do you think are the most critical points here?
Mm. Yeah, that's a good point. I think we are in the kind of third wave of hydrogen being brought up. And after the second wave, which was more directed to mobility and cars, it's now really the point that hydrogen has to be the second or the third pillar in the energy system. First, electrification, energy efficiency, and then the hydrogen, the range of hydrogen and its derivatives. And we all know theoretically that it has to be part of the net zero energy system. And we also see that the announced projects, the planned projects are really piling up worldwide. So it's breathtaking if you look to the IEA's register, for example, and their databases. The point is, if you then look which part of the projects have really FID, it's kind of a reality check, because depending on where you look at it, it's around 10% only. But still, you see there is this growing tendency with the projects planned to bet on this path. What is needed, I think, is exactly a reliable offtake. So to see applications really being in place, that's the one thing that you can really say, yeah, we have the industrial applications, the sectors that have changed, for example, from traditional steel making into direct reduction, DRI application. So that's kind of, you need a technology change in many industrial sectors to use hydrogen, but there's not a big technology hurdle. And the other point is really, I mean, hydrogen is too expensive. That's maybe the major point. So and too expensive means in relation to the alternative fuels that we are using now, and that's the issue. So it's a technology where it's used, and it's basically, there is no business case at the moment. So you need to create, I don't know, green lead markets. You need to define quotas for green hydrogen and its derivatives to develop a reliable business case along the supply chain. And even with that, you still have exactly these challenges along the supply chain. Because from, well, out of Germany, out of Europe, it's really, if we analytically grab what the challenge is, I would say the challenge is we are for the first time introducing an energy carrier in an environment of competition and unbundling. So it's not an integrated building up of the supply chain with production, then transport, and then the takeoff. But it's really the pipeline sector. This has to be transformed refurbished, and production has to be built up. And at the same time, in parallel, the industrial applications have to do their technology changes. And that is really a challenge. And without having really this clear business case, it's the technological challenge that all parts of the supply chain fit together. And it's really a challenging issue. So it's not like oil and gas, you drill and then you have high capital costs at the beginning, but you have a very complex technological process in many parts of the supply chain, and also the capital costs. So you really have to think through, the business cases at each part of the value chain and whether this fits, and to take a risk. And beyond this technological challenge and the capital challenge, you also have this issue of, well, then commercially, the contractual, how to put contractually the supply chain together, which is also, well, has to be done for the first time, and to find, a balance between risks and opportunities. So this is where we are. But I think Germany is moving ahead, and Germany pronouncedly said, yes, we will be at the forefront. And we have now started some, let's say, support schemes that are very interesting with regard to really kicking off and incentivizing first supply chains to be built. And maybe I give a view on where we stand in Germany. That might be interesting.
Yeah, that would be really great because, when you started to name all these challenges which have to be resolved, starting from demand and technology supply chain and capital problem and creating business case and then making all the contracts around, I was thinking like, oh my God, that's really difficult. It will take decades before it will be able to fly it without really massive state support. So thinking about, it's like creating a whole new sector from a scratch, and creating it without real economic grounds at the moment. So to a certain extent, it's similar to, let's say, solar and wind development maybe 20 years ago, when they required massive subsidies and very favorable regulatory environment just to pick up. Then they became competitive. Then through the scaling up effect and all the R&D improvement, now it can compete in the market without state support, basically. But hydrogen is not there. It's in a much earlier stage. So how long do you think it will take to make it competitive, to create all these supply chains and all the institutional framework needed? And exactly, Germany is definitely one of the leading countries, not the only. I would say like China, Japan are also extremely focused on hydrogen, but one of the leading countries. So what's the plan?
It's an extremely good point to bring in solar and wind. Yeah, exactly. Of course, the hope is, and the bet is, with scaling up, costs will come down, and I'm really convinced this will be the case. But still, you have the operating costs, which you don't have that much with solar and wind, because you need either electricity or natural gas starting the electrolyzers or the steam methane reforming. That's an issue. And the other point is, solar and wind, yes, but electricity had a market already to feed in. Which this is exactly the point. You don't have a market. We talk in Germany about the market ramp up, but I'm always saying, no, we are just we have to build up the market. It's not yet there. And this is what I mean with for the very first time introducing an energy carrier, really building up a market, and this in this competition field, and under the acceleration that we need with respect to the climate change that we are really feeling and seeing every day, or at least every winter and summer. So that's the challenge. Where are we? Well, Germany has a natural hydrogen strategy since summer 2020. And I would say, well, with the Corona and then Russia's attack against Ukraine, the first years were somehow lost years, because we had to simply rearrange the natural gas supplies. So you see really a push in 2023, where we started to plan how to ramp up hydrogen. And one issue was, or one instrument was, of course, H2 Global. And this addresses imports globally and worldwide into Germany of derivatives, ammonia, methanol, sustainable aviation fuel. And of course, it's not a lot of money in the first round, with 900 million that are spent of state money, but it is creating a learning and experimental space in order to build up the supply chains. And this is exactly what is needed. So that's one instrument. The other very important instrument, and larger in scale, started actually last month, with the climate contracts for difference, which apply to industry, and saying, yeah, that you can rearrange the industrial processes, the applications, plus buying hydrogen that is needed, and you will get the refunding there for climate contracts for difference with regard to the alternative fuel and the carbon price. So this is creating a business case in that regard.
And what is the reaction of the industrial companies? Did they start to do it? Are they testing?
Yeah, of course. There's a big run now, but the round of applications has just started. But this is what I mean. I mean, as we all know, innovations in energy industries, they take some time. We have to think about long lead times. So it won't just start by a bang, or just, we can't simply turn the switch. It will take some time. But I think it's very important to watch these climate contracts for difference scheme. And the other thing is that we are now working on a core grid for hydrogen in Germany that is supposed to start after summer, or get the okay in summer by the regulatory authority. And this is extremely important, because infrastructure is a precondition to really start, in particular in this unbundled system that we're talking about. So we have always said in the National Hydrogen Council, there are two preconditions to really address this hen and egg problem that we are always talking about. And what I tried to mention with the complex supply chain, that where our parts have to fit together, and who starts first, the hen or the egg? And then we say, well, it's not just the hen, you also need the cock, and maybe the house for the hens, because otherwise
the whole farm,
the cocks will come. So just think about what is house and what is the cock. But you need, of course, infrastructure, and that means the pipelines, and that means also turning an existing asset that we're still having with the pipeline system into a future asset, but also the harbors, the ports that are extremely important with regard to the ships that will come in with the derivatives. And the other precondition to really start with hydrogen is, of course, the regulatory framework. So that means the definitions of hydrogen, the guarantees of origin, the certification, because the molecule as such, that's what I tried to explain, it is more expensive to produce than just natural gas to pump. So you're not achieving your earnings with the molecule as such, but with the decarbonized or green property that comes with the molecule. So you need to have an integer and transparent and reliable certification scheme. And this is also still in the making. So it really, yes, there's a lot to do. But actually the EU is working on, of course, the regulatory framework. But this is maybe where we stand right now. First, applying early support schemes, because as you rightly said, Tatiana, you can't imagine this ramp up, this scale up without state support. Because as we said, the alternative fuel is too cheap, or hydrogen too expensive relatively. So there need to be a state support, or at least kind of quotas that we're now seeing, for example, in the industry for 2030. And this is applied on the European level.
And with this state support, if there are any numbers that you could share, so again, Germany is declaring this focus on hydrogen. It is creating these, trying to support creation of this whole hydrogen infrastructure. And what is the magnitude of finance? Are we talking about millions, billions, tens of billions euros? So at least some feeling for our audience.
I think the support has to be huge. But when we talk about the actual figures for H2 Global, this import scheme, it's now 900 million for the first rounds, and this is really homeopathic. If you think it's 3 products, it's for 10 years contracts, that's not that much. This is why
so it's rather pilot, yeah.
It's rather pilot, but this is, at least we are starting. And not just talking. That's important. But there's the second wave with 3.45 billion then. 3.5 billion. So it's increasing here. And then, of course, you have a large 30 billion now for this carbon contracts for different scheme only this year. So it's 2 waves.
30 billion only this year.
30, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, but of course the carbon contracts for different scheme is also lasting longer. So, but this is about, and with regard to the corporate that I mentioned for hydrogen, we're talking about a cost of around 20 billion as well, euros. But this is then partly state, partly a scheme that partly also brings in private money and state subsidiary state guarantees. So it's really also about finding new innovative support schemes, or let's say subsidiary guarantees if the ramp up doesn't work or not in the time as expected.
This is already a material amount of
Exactly.
money. Yeah, so when we are talking about tens of billions of euros, this sounds very serious. And okay, I'm getting already some questions here, so let me start asking them. So first of all this hydrogen debate between green versus gray versus blue versus the other colors. Where do we think we are standing now? And should it be only the focus on green hydrogen, or should we rather embrace all the colors of hydrogen as this transitional solution?
That's a tricky question with regard to asking that to a representative of an association. So the association has a very clear view on that we will need at the beginning blue, also turquoise hydrogen, and also green hydrogen. And I also think personally that, of course, for the ramp up, we will need the colors of hydrogen. And also if we think about the bigger EU hydrogen market, then I think that there will be different ways to produce hydrogen. And I simply couldn't think about a functioning market and flows within the infrastructure if it's very difficult to really attach the characteristics, the properties to the molecules. So, well, gray, of course, is traditionally produced hydrogen, and we have to get rid of that. So CCS will be needed there, and then it will be blue hydrogen. And we will, of course, need much more than we are now producing with regard to gray hydrogen. And just to give you an idea, and I looked up the volumes at the moment in Germany, the gray hydrogen being used is 36 terawatt hours or 1.1 million tons. And we expect that we need in 2030 already 70 terawatt hours or 2.1 million tons, almost a doubling.
Yeah.
Of decarbonized, defossilized hydrogen. And this, of course, will be much larger when you have to replace other forms of industrial production. So yeah, for the ramp up, of course, blue hydrogen is also needed. I personally think that we have to look into technologies like turquoise hydrogen, so pyrolysis, and yeah, as always, we need innovation and technologies, and that's the interesting and challenging thing. I mean, that is also the promise why I think hydrogen is not just an issue of the energy transformation, but very much of the industrial transformation. There are big opportunities with regard to electrolyzers production, to technologies like crackers for ammonia. That is an opportunity, of course, for a national economy and for engineers. And we have to live that spirit. And this is why I'm struggling with a very strict approach, what should be and has to be and must not be.
So, Kirsten, with this technological side, you've mentioned this approximately 1 million tons of green hydrogen in Germany already now. So,
gray.
It's gray. Yeah,
it's gray.
It's still gray.
It's still gray, but that
by
has 2030, to be replaced.
So, are there any cases of really green hydrogen production, transportation, and consumption? So, like building this whole supply chain, maybe in a small volumes, maybe just for one project, but is it already operating, all these parts, all these technological solutions needed to produce, transport, and consume green hydrogen?
Yeah, of course, we have a small pilot demonstrator projects, like, for example, producing hydrogen for local buses and transport. But this is demonstrating pilot projects and of course, expensive. And what is also started, and I should have mentioned that in regard to the support schemes, of course, you have the important projects of common European interest, where you have just clusters along the whole supply chain that are now started. But this has come just some months ago. So again, it's very early, but you have really kind of kickoffs now for starting the supply chains. And just to give you an idea, we are still very. You asked how much green hydrogen. The figures that I'm having is that right now, today in Germany, you have an installed electrolyzer capacity of 153 megawatt. The announced projects are around more than 12 gigawatt for 2030. So the gap is huge, but the planning is already starting and going on. And some projects are really at the verge to start. And the declared objective in the renewed national hydrogen strategy is 10 gigawatts. So it's interesting. The announced projects are already beyond the 10 gigawatt for 2030. As I said, 12. announced gigawatt, but it's still announced.
And they will still have to solve all the technological challenges and to make all these hardware working, which is not easy when you are doing it for the first time, obviously.
Exactly.
Another question that I've got, it's rather demand related. Yeah, you've mentioned that the first task that you have to solve with hydrogen is to find the consumers. Yeah, because they probably do not know that they are potential consumers of hydrogen, or they don't want to change anything in their operating schemes, which is always some pain and not very comfortable. So the question from the audience is, uh, it's about the decarbonized molecules, and that if it is so hard to decarbonize even simple molecules, what has to be done about plastics and pharmaceuticals? Yeah, so decarbonized chemistry. So are we looking there at all? Are there any attempts for the chemical industry, for the plastic producers to think about decarbonized molecules?
That's very much a feedstock question. And I'm not a specialist there. Here the issue, I think what to watch is really that this industries will also need carbon. So it's again back to this point that I made earlier of maybe think that we will need carbon. So it's more defossilization, and here biomethane, for example, comes in, and other maybe direct air capture. But applications is certainly an issue, and feedstock issues are extremely important. And we're now seeing a lot of hydrogen going into the refinery sector, because there you have this greenhouse gas quotas where it makes a business case now because of the specific regulatory scheme in Europe, so that there is one first application that works and provides a business case. The other point is really, as I mentioned, steel, with the direct DRI. What does it stand for? Direct reduction. DRI. So it's really another technology, but Germany has also put out and granted already support to big steel suppliers. So this transformation of the production process will be implemented, and then you can already bet on a coming need for first natural gas and then hydrogen by the steel producers. So this will be the first real streams, and then, as we said, mobility.
Painful question regarding decarbonization of the industrial sector. It's related to the general deindustrialization happening in Europe. Yeah, so it started well before the recent events. Yeah, it is a trend, so moving the industrial enterprises to the other parts of the world, to China, Southeast Asia, US, due to the cheaper labor force, cheaper energy, and so on. It has definitely increased during the last couple of years with the spiking gas prices. So we see this industrial gas demand going down quite considerably during the past 2 years. There are now some signs of stabilization, and the natural gas prices are again at quite comfortable level. But basically, the question is whether these trouble environment and additional pressure enforcing industrial consumers to switch to hydrogen wouldn't kill them completely, and wouldn't force them to leave Europe looking for more for softer regulation and less pressing surroundings. What do you think?
I can only say I hope not, and this will very much depend on the regulatory scheme, and not all industries can move. So for Germany, for Europe, the small and medium-sized enterprises are extremely important. So for them, this is really an issue that we are moving forward with not only the hydrogen core grid, but also then with the distributional grid, because it's really for Germany, we have exact figures that 1.8 million small and medium-sized enterprises have access to gas and need gas for their processes or transform their modes of production. And of course, they will need to have a way, not out of Germany, but a way for out of into a future energy supplies. So that's extremely important. And this is why the German government has clearly said that this core hydrogen grid is not a grid that is planned on actual consumption, as we do with, or as we've done with natural gas, but it's really a politically set hydrogen grid that makes a strong signal into Germany, into all regions, north, south, east, west, that they will have an access to the hydrogen core grid. So that's an idea behind this politically set and is planned hydrogen grid. I mean, yes, I think this will be a structural challenge that Germany and Europe is facing. That also with the energy transformation, of course, there will be regions that have a cheaper way to produce either natural gas, like the US with the Henry Hub. We've dealt with that for some time, and as you said, Tatiana, some have moved. The same will be probably the case with hydrogen, and clearly the case with hydrogen, because if you have bright sun, steady winds, and space to build up large wind farms, sun farms, then you have to look into the neighboring or regions that are far away. But this will be a structural challenge to deal with, yes.
And you've mentioned, so now I wanted to spend a bit more time on the infrastructure development. Yeah, you've mentioned already this German plan on infrastructure incentives. And before that, you've mentioned this idea of creating, I don't remember, did you call them like industrial clusters or like hubs? Yeah, with the whole ecosystem for hydrogen production, transportation, and consumption within one location. Yeah, linking several industrial enterprises and the infrastructure like ports, harbors, and everything. So, does Germany have any of these clusters evolving already, and where are they?
Yeah, exactly. I think we have to think in clusters and corridors for the first starting years, and then in thinking that a hydrogen core grid, as it's called in Germany, or hydrogen backbone, as it's called in the European Union. So it's not just the German core grid that is out there, and you can find the maps in the World Wide Web, but also a hydrogen backbone is planned. And then you will see a linking and interconnecting of the clusters with the pipelines. I think this will be the process in the ramping up and building up markets as well. And yes, first clusters are starting to work. Both pilot projects, both in eastern parts of Germany around refineries, for example, but also in the western parts where you have a combination of both vectors into the cluster region, first pipeline projects, but also electrolyzers starting to work, and off-takers like refineries. And that is starting. with this process also about and around important projects of common European interest.
And then another question, and then I'm getting also additional questions from the audience. So one question from myself first. What are the opportunities to finance all these clusters and corridors developments on top of the state financing? So you've mentioned briefly that there is an idea to attract private capital to these infrastructure investments. So what could be attractive for them? How to make it a business case for them, not a charity? Yeah. So where do they see return on the capital invested? How can they explain it to their shareholders?
You know, if you have all audience, if you have ideas, let me know. We are currently working on that, because you really need a coherent support scheme for the beginning, but which doesn't stay permanently. That's the point. We have the idea, and myself also very strongly, that we have an initial period, which we are in right now, where we have to start with the kickoff with clusters, and infrastructure has to be built, and then we have to start to ramp up production, demand and supply, and starting to building up a market, and then the market will evolve. And in the final phase, we will see a kind of balanced, I'm not talking about the liquid market is far away, but at least a balanced market with supply and demand corresponding on prices. And this has to be the idea where we're working at. So it's simply to see which support scheme, which support do I need in which phase, and maybe a point to look at what has happened. Are we there? And to adjust the regulatory frame of the support schemes. I think it's very important to have a coherent support scheme, in particular with regard to the contracts for difference, because you can't support at many parts of the value chain, because then you will run into problems and high windfall profits in a particular supply chain. So you have to avoid that. So exactly, to put a long story short, we are now looking into a right and a coherent support scheme. What is obvious, though, is I think the product side, and you have to build green lead markets. So maybe cars that apply to high-end customer segments, where customers are willing to pay for green steel, because the product as such is very expensive, and the green steel just forms a little part of it. So this idea of green lead markets is highly important. Or cost, no, exactly. Let me know if you find ideas. But these green lead markets are extremely important. Beyond, of course, quotas are an issue, as we've seen in the transport sector. But what remains a challenge is Germany and Europe can't do that alone. It has to be an endeavor of, let's say, a club of states at least, to push forward not only the green electricity revolution, but really the green or decarbonized molecules evolution. Otherwise, it will be too expensive.
That's true. Okay, let's take several questions from the audience. Are hydrogen and biogas more a local or a global decarbonization solution in its current state, given the challenges of its transportation? Is it the solution that fits all the countries?
In the current stage, and I think it's a very good question, at the current stage, it's local, but we have to move to make it a regional and a global story. So I think to compare it with the LNG market and how the gas market has moved is maybe very helpful, because you can think about transport vectors first: ammonia, methanol, which can be easily shipped, or later really liquefied hydrogen. But this is the technological challenges that we still have to address, and it can only be done internationally. And the global and worldwide story for me is easy to answer. If you really want to move to net zero and address the pressing climate challenge that we are facing every day, you need these kind of defossilized, decarbonized molecules. In line with other technologies, of course.
We need everything. Yeah, I completely agree.
Exactly.
And the follow-up question, what are the main criteria to understand if biogas and hydrogen are good solutions for the national decarbonization strategy? So for the different countries, how should they decide on hydrogen and biogas?
Mm-hmm. Also a good question. I mean, what is done in Germany is that here really, yeah, at the forefront or at the front, you normally do modeling on a systemic aggregated level, and then you come to, well, systemic solutions. But as we all know, that gives us an idea, but a very simplified, because again, we are not doing that from scratch. So I think the way will be much more starting regionally, locally, starting with clusters, starting with corridors, and a kind of good modeling through. Thinking about solutions that provide us with a good way out of solving a big bunch of greenhouse gas emissions, and then look and see how the system fits together. So doing a kind of looking what is good in the system, but also in the location as such, because I think what we all have to think through is not only, again, the energy supply, but circular processes. Clusters, we have to think through how will be the flows organized, both for energy, water, heating, cooling, and this provides us with new solutions. And I think so. I'm a bit, yeah, systemic solutions, and the systemic planning is an exercise that certainly has to be done, but it has to be likewise and equally done at the local level, and then in an iterative process, see how it fits together. So a lot will be muddling through, as always, and depending on the investment cycles that are needed in specific industrial clusters, they will move forward with the first waves and test. And this is something I think that governments have to deal with, to enable these first movers to early actions, to value early actions, because they are taking a larger risks, and second movers have an advantage, and therefore you have often a wait and see approach. And I think this is something where I would also see governments and the need for governments to step in and take out early action risks, and or to value these early movers.
Oh, we are getting greetings from our listeners from Lima in Peru.
Ay, me alegro mucho. Saludos cordiales.
There is another question. If you could recommend some researches or articles or infographics to get the system overview of decarbonized and defossilized molecules to understand the topic better. So something comprehensive on one page.
Oh, yeah. I look at the well-known websites of the International Energy Agency, the Hydrogen Council. We have also done at H2 Global publications where you can find a schematic illustration of how the supply chains look like for hydrogen, ammonia, methanol, and also a kind of illustration what are the commercial challenges and contractual challenges, which I find very useful, and which we worked out with the companies involved. So that might be helpful as well. Hydrogen clouds I mentioned, yeah.
Great. Kirsten, we are approaching to the end of our conversation, but before we finish, I would like to ask you to make the following exercise. If you could, if you were a magician and you could decide what will be the most important message our audience would take away from our discussion, what message would it be?
That's very easy. Simply start. I think we have talked too much and are thinking that back and forth, but we have to simply implement the first supply chains in order to have the learning and experimental space and then build on that and scale.
Great. Thank you so much. That was fantastic. I've really enjoyed this conversation, and I hope that people who are listening to it right now also share, well, first of all, this passion that Kirsten has definitely towards this topic, but also its complexity, all the challenges behind. So I think it's really a fascinating topic, and we had really fascinating speakers. Thank you so much for being with us. And for our
audience.
Thank
you, Tatiana, for having me.
For our audience, stay with us, follow our next announcements and the next live events. It's always fun, and keep safe. Yeah. Thank you, and bye-bye.